What's up, guys?
Good afternoon. Nice to see everybody. Alright. So what are we talking about today? Something professional here?
Today we're going to be professional. We're talking about what makes a catastrophic injury. And we're talking about the kind of injury that generates probably some of the largest settlements in the state. Normally, when you have a major injury case, it would usually involve someone who has a very severe injury. It could be orthopedic, it could be neurologic, very often brain injuries.
Right. So catastrophic doesn't have to be just a brain injury.
Correct.
It can be also, for example, a back injury that results in a half paralysis. So it can be sometimes the injury itself can be catastrophic, car accidents, fall off a roof, getting hit in the head, various type of situations where direct head traumas creates that. Or you might have a small procedure, epidural or surgery or something like that, and you have during the procedure something goes bad, and all of a sudden the person wakes up and he's quadriplegic, God forbid, or maybe he's paraplegic. So those are big problem cases as well.
I think it's fair to characterize it as we're looking at the result of a particular injury as opposed to the events. So many times, we've seen situations where somebody can fall off a 5-story building and the injury cannot be, might be a broken bone or something that's not that significant. And then we've seen it the other way around where the actual occurrence or the circumstances do not seem to be that significant, and yet the result is quite catastrophic.
Some of it is self-creating as well. You got to have, in the situation of every catastrophic injury, you got to have parties on both sides, right? You got to have somebody who's representing the person who got hurt significantly, and you have somebody on the other side who has to realize that, look, this is a significant injury. It can be exposure on that injury, it's multi-million situation. May it be just the medical care, may it be the 24/7 around-the-clock care, may it be just the indemnity value. You have to figure these three kind of elements together, right? They become kind of perfect trifecta. To make it a multi-million case, 5, 10, that's the biggest difference will be the impact or the injury itself, the resulting variety of the injuries, definitely catastrophic. That person is not going to work in any foreseeable future. So that's like the step one. Majority of the time, the medical care, the second part of it, is around the clock. He cannot be left unsupervised. It can be at his own house or residence, or more likely than not, it's going to be in some kind of facility. It can be a hospital. It can be like created a long-term care facility, which it costs a substantial amount of money. And the third factor, the age of the unfortunate person. The younger he is, the more catastrophic it's going to become.
So if you have a 20 or 30-year-old who's partially paralyzed or paralyzed and is dependent on care or needs a special facility and needs all kinds of treatments, it's going to have a very different value than if you have someone who's 80-year-old or 70-year-old.
What is it that person will need? And that coupled with, again, unfortunately, the younger the person, the more years, the expectancy that would carry, that would what drive the cost of the exposure of the case of the medical care.
Would it make a difference whether the case is denied or admitted?
In initial stages, it'll make a difference. You're going to have to litigate the acceptance, or as we say, AOE, arising out of employment in the course of employment, synonymous whether the injury is industrial and should be industrially compensable under the laws of California workers' compensation. So that would be, the key component. You have to litigate that first. After that's completed, the rest becomes the magnitude of the case, age, medical care. Those three factors will come together to drive the value.
You actually mentioned something interesting when you were talking about the different type of cases, and we mentioned that it's pretty clear if can fall from a circumstance where it seems catastrophic, and then somebody falls and then he becomes paraplegic or injures his spine and so forth. The other scenario we gave is something that starts small and eventually blows up on someone, right? I guess the question that's important is that at what point do you think, or where does the attorneys come in managing that case and seeing it for more than what it is beyond that?
I think the key is communication with your client.
Most of the largest awards that I've received were usually on denied cases. So you brought up the issue, denied versus admitted. Is it from work? What to make it less complicated? So you have to show how the injury was connected to work. And we can use an example of a case, but then you got the severity. So you got two factors. One is the injury related to work, and you may have to do a lot of litigation and prove that part. And two, what's the extent and severity of the disability? So for example, one of the cases that had one of the largest awards in the state was a nanny that was traveling with a family. I guess they were on a ski trip of some sort, and there was a vehicular accident. She suffered from a brain injury, clearly very debilitating brain injury, and that's the typical type of catastrophic. I mean, not every car accident results in a catastrophic injury, so it was clearly a substantial injury, but the extent of the brain injury rendered her apparently unable to care for herself. Not everyone has a family member who can take them home and take care of them around the clock. Spouses or family members have jobs, have other things they have to do. You could be talking about something that could cost, $700,000 to $1 million a year without any other unforeseen circumstances. And if you're talking about someone who's in the 40s or 50s, you're talking about millions and millions and millions of dollars. The indemnity portion in workers' compensation depends on their wages, and the maximum rate, I think, for this year would be like close to $1,600.
A little bit over.
A week. That's not that much money, because even if the person would be earning $500,000 a year, for workers' compensation there's a maximum. So the liability for the indemnity is very different with the medical care. The medical care costs may outweigh it so substantially, where I think in that case you ended up settling for like over $11 million.
We have to keep focused that the settlement of the case for the 8 figures versus award that you get from the judge or through the trial system are different issues. You will not be able, mathematically speaking, to get an 8-figure finding from the Workers' Compensation Appeals Board. It's a mathematical impossibility, right? You can only get it by agreement between the parties to buy out the aspect of the most expensive part of these catastrophic cases is the future medical care. So sometimes you also have to remember there's always somebody on the other side of this equation, such as an insurance carrier, and hopefully they have a good attorney who can explain the cost of these cases to make it worthwhile for them to basically look, maybe it's a better idea to pay this person 8 figures, 10, 15, 20 million today versus the care for the next 15 years, which might end up to be in the 50 million range. Depends on the ongoing care necessary. So there has to be this give and take. How does an attorney figure out the, say, a major case versus catastrophic case, right? Where's that threshold, and how do you take it from the, like, this is a significant injury, I can see the problems, to turn it into, let's say, this is a completely catastrophic case. I think that line is where a lot of the medical development and a lot of litigation might happen. It's not litigation whether or not this injury occurred at that point. It's litigation, look, what type of care this person needs.
What are the changes? And then the next step is getting the right expert. The expert to identify the exact diagnosis and the condition the person is suffering, and then match the treatment to that. I think that's key, but that takes time. Those kind of cases don't get developed overnight. They take years of developing. And by the way, to something you said, the insurance companies sometimes see the light and sometimes don't. They say, oh, this is going to be very expensive. And sometimes they don't want to fork over the buyout for someone's 10 or 20 year or 30 year life expectancy that's going to cost them millions and millions of dollars. And they're going to bet, hey, maybe this person's not going to make it. Maybe the life expectancy of this person now that's shortened with catastrophic medical conditions, they're not going to live for very long. So they're going to try and say, you know what, fine, we're going to pay for the medical expenses and we'll take it, one day at a time. Sometimes though, it's important for them to get kind of their own medicine. They should be paying for those expenses And sometimes after year 2 or 3 of paying those expenses, they realize they may have miscalculated. That maybe those expenses are going to be so substantial that they're better off putting some of the money up front, which is true. It may be a lot of money, and maybe the person's not going to live as long as the estimate is on the parties, but they get predictability. They know what it's going to cost them, and that's going to be the end, versus not knowing and things changing years. They could end up paying that $10 million over a few year period and then still have an open case with a lifetime of medical care. So a lot of times they do need to see how much they're spending, and if they don't, they're not going to want to put the money in order to resolve it.
Just to sum it up, we got to remember the three components to every catastrophic case, right? It's the injury or the impact of the injury, or medical treatment that results in the impact of the injury, the age of an unfortunate individual, and the necessity for medical care. I think those are three components it's a full definition of the catastrophic injury.
And someone who recognizes all those and can put it together.
Yes, that's I will agree with that.
All right, and the only thing left to do is Minnesota sweeping Denver.
Hopefully.
Is there going to be a catastrophic loss?
It's catastrophic loss.
For Denver, it will be. No heating pads.
All right.
All right, guys.
Good discussion. We'll pick it up.
Yeah.